Maria Gonzalez pressed her weathered hands against the cool glass of the coffee shop window, watching the morning rush in downtown Phoenix. At 62, her dark eyes still held the fire that had carried her through decades of struggle, but today they were clouded with a familiar ache. The Arizona sun cast long shadows across Central Avenue as she sipped her café con leche, the same order she'd made every Tuesday for 3 years since she'd discovered this particular coffee shop sat just 2 blocks from Lincoln Elementary School. Her son Michael's children went to Lincoln Elementary, 8-year-old Sophia and 6-year-old Diego, her grandchildren, the ones who didn't know she existed. The irony wasn't lost on her that she'd moved from El Paso to Phoenix specifically to be closer to family, only to become more invisible than ever. Michael had been clear about the rules when she'd announced her relocation. "You can visit Mom, but only when I say so. Rebecca doesn't need the stress, and the kids, they're too young to understand our complicated history." Complicated history. That's what he called 28 years of single motherhood. Working double shifts at the hospital to put him through college, sacrificing her own dreams so he could chase his complicated history was how he dismissed the nights she'd held him through nightmares. The times she'd gone without meals so he could have school supplies. The way she'd cheered the loudest at every graduation, every promotion, every milestone. The coffee shop door chimed and Maria's pulse quickened. A woman with perfectly styled blonde hair and designer workout clothes entered. Rebecca, Michael's wife. Maria instinctively ducked behind her newspaper, a ritual she'd perfected over the months of accidental encounters. Rebecca ordered her usual skinny vanilla latte, her voice carrying that crisp, educated tone that Michael had adopted since marrying her. "Make sure it's extra hot," Rebecca told the barista. "I have a PTA meeting in 20 minutes, and you know how these things drag on." PTA meeting at Lincoln Elementary. Maria's heart hammered against her ribs as Rebecca collected her drink and swept out the door. Her yoga pants and oversized sunglasses, the uniform of suburban motherhood that Maria had never quite managed to master. After Rebecca disappeared around the corner, Maria sat in the silence of missed opportunities. 3 years of Tuesday morning coffee rituals. 3 years of glimpsing her son's life from the periphery. 3 years of being erased from her own family's story. Her phone buzzed with a text from her neighbor. "Mrs. Chen saw Michael's car in your driveway last night. Everything okay?" Maria stared at the message, remembering last night's visit. Michael had come by after the kids were asleep, as he always did, carrying that familiar expression of duty mixed with guilt. They'd sat in her small living room, surrounded by photos of him at every age, photos that would never hang in his house because they included her. "How are Sophia and Diego?" she'd asked. The same question she asked every visit. "They're good, Mom, really good. Sophia's learning violin, and Diego just lost his first tooth. I'd love to see them play violin, or maybe help Diego write a letter to the tooth fairy in Spanish, Mom." His voice had carried that warning tone she'd grown to hate. "We've talked about this. Rebecca's family is very involved in the kids' lives. It would be confusing to suddenly introduce ... complications. Complications, there was that word again. I'm their grandmother, Michael, not a complication." "I know what you are to me," he'd said, standing to leave, "but they think their grandmother isn't with us anymore? It's easier that way. Dead." He'd told his children their grandmother was dead now. Sitting in the coffee shop where she'd watched her son's life unfold from a distance, Maria made a decision that had been building for 3 years. She pulled out her phone and searched for Lincoln Elementary School's website. Under the Community Events tab, she found what she was looking for. Grandparents' Day Celebration Friday, October 15th, 2 p.m. Join us for an afternoon of storytelling, crafts, and connecting generations. Friday, 4 days away, Maria closed her laptop and walked to her car, her mind already spinning with possibilities. She'd been patient long enough. She'd respected Michael's wishes, lived in the shadows, accepted her role as the family secret, but her grandchildren deserved to know they had a grandmother who loved them, a grandmother who was very much alive. That evening, Maria stood in front of her bedroom mirror, trying on the dress she'd bought but never worn, a deep purple that brought out her eyes, elegant but approachable. She practiced introducing herself, each version sounding more foreign than the last. "Hi, I'm Maria Sophia and Diego's grandmother." Too simple. "Hello, my name is Maria Gonzalez. I believe there's been a misunderstanding about whether I exist." Confrontational? "Hi there. I'm Abuela Maria. I've been waiting so long to meet you." Perfect. Her phone rang, interrupting her rehearsal. Michael's name flashed on the screen. "Hi, mijo," she answered, her voice steadier than she felt. "Mom, I wanted to let you know we might not be able to visit this week. Rebecca's got the kids in some new after-school program, and weekends are crazy with soccer and Michael." She interrupted something she rarely did. Do you remember when you were 7 and you broke Mrs. Peterson's window playing baseball? What? Mom, what does that have to— You were so scared to tell me. You thought I'd be angry, maybe stop loving you. But I told you that nothing you could do would ever make me stop being your mother. Remember? Silence stretched between them. I remember, he said quietly. I meant it then, and I mean it now. Nothing will ever make me stop being your mother, and nothing will ever make me stop being their grandmother. She hung up before he could respond, her hands shaking slightly. In 4 days, she would walk into Lincoln Elementary School. In 4 days, she would meet her grandchildren properly for the first time. In 4 days, the secret that had kept her family fractured would finally see the light. Outside her window, the Phoenix sun was setting, painting the desert sky in shades of pink and gold. For the first time in 3 years, Maria went to sleep without the weight of invisibility pressing down on her chest. Friday morning arrived with the kind of crisp October weather that made Phoenix beautiful, 75 degrees with a gentle breeze that carried the scent of desert sage. Maria had been awake since 5 a.m. Her stomach twisted with nervous energy that reminded her of her first day working at the hospital 35 years ago. She'd changed outfits 3 times before settling on the purple dress with comfortable flats and the silver necklace Michael had given her for her 60th birthday back when their relationship hadn't required secrecy and shame. Lincoln Elementary buzzed with activity as cars lined up in the drop-off zone. Maria parked across the street, watching through her windshield as grandparents emerged from vehicles carrying flowers, homemade cookies, and photo albums. A silver-haired man in a cardigan helped his wife out of a Honda Civic, both of them beaming with anticipation. An elderly woman clutched a manila folder thick with what looked like family pictures, her grandson's name written in careful cursive on the front. Maria touched the small photo album in her purse, pictures of Michael from birth to high school. Graduation, carefully curated to tell the story of a mother's love without revealing too much of their struggles. She'd spent hours the night before selecting each image, wanting to show Sophia and Diego that their father had been loved, celebrated, cherished, not abandoned or forgotten, as his current narrative suggested. At exactly 1:45 p.m., Maria crossed the street and entered Lincoln Elementary for the first time. The hallways smelled like disinfectant in childhood, that particular mix of chalk dust, cafeteria food, and the lingering excitement of young dreams. Colorful artwork covered every available wall space, handprints transformed into turkeys, and poems about friendship written in wobbly third-grade cursive. Welcome to Grandparents' Day. A teacher with kind eyes and a clipboard approached her. I'm Mrs. Martinez, the volunteer coordinator. Are you here for a specific student? Maria's throat felt dry. Yes, I'm here for Sofia and Diego Reyes. Mrs. Martinez consulted her list, her smile faltering slightly. I don't see you on our approved visitor list for the Reyes children. All grandparents need to be pre-registered by the parents. Heat crept up Maria's neck. Of course, Michael hadn't registered her. Of course there would be obstacles. I understand, Maria said, forcing calm into her voice. With my son, could I perhaps speak with Sophia and Diego's teacher? I've driven quite a distance to be here today. Something in Maria's tone, perhaps. The quiet dignity of a woman who had faced rejection before made Mrs. Martinez pause. Let me see what I can do. What's your name? Maria Gonzalez. Sophia and Diego are my grandchildren. Shifted slightly, and Maria wondered what stories had been told about her. What version of events had made it into the school's unofficial network of parent gossip? Wait here just a moment, Mrs. Martinez said, disappearing down the hallway. Maria stood in the main corridor, watching other grandparents head toward classrooms with their excited grandchildren. A little girl with pigtails tugged on her grandfather's hand, chattering about the clay pot she'd made in art class. An elderly man with a walker moved slowly but determinedly, his grandson patiently matching his pace. Mrs. Gonzalez, a tall woman with graying hair, approached. I'm Principal Davidson. Could we speak privately for a moment? They walked to the principal's office and Maria's palms began to sweat. This felt like the moment before a diagnosis. The pause before life-changing news. I'm a bit confused, Principal Davidson said gently, settling behind her desk. We have Sophia and Diego Reyes in our 2nd and 1st grade classes, and their parents, Michael and Rebecca, have been very involved in school activities, but we were told that both paternal and maternal grandparents had passed away. The words hit Maria like a physical blow, even though she'd known they were coming. Hearing it from a stranger made Michael's betrayal feel fresh and sharp. I'm very much alive, Maria said quietly. I'm Sophia and Diego's paternal grandmother. Michael is my son. Principal Davidson studied Maria's face, perhaps looking for resemblance, perhaps trying to navigate the delicate family politics that occasionally spilled into school hallways. I see, she said carefully. This is unusual. Without the parents' permission, I can't allow you to interact with the children. Perhaps we could call Mr. Reyes, please, Maria interrupted, her voice stronger now. I know this is irregular. I know it's complicated, but I am their biological grandmother. I live 20 minutes from this school, and I have spent 3 years respecting my son's wishes to remain invisible. Today, I'm asking for 20 minutes to meet my grandchildren properly. If they're uncomfortable, if they don't want to speak with me, I'll leave immediately. The principal's phone buzzed. Excuse me, one moment, she answered, listened, then looked at Maria with new interest. That was Mrs. Patterson, Sophia's teacher. Apparently, Sophia has been telling her classmates that she wishes she had a grandmother like the other kids. She's been asking questions about what grandmothers do, why some children have them and others don't. Maria's heart clenched. Her granddaughter was longing for exactly what Michael was denying her. Mrs. Gonzalez, Principal Davidson continued, I'm going to make an exception. I'll allow you to attend the Grandparents' Day activities, but I'm also calling Mr. and Mrs. Reyes to inform them of the situation. This is their school, and they have a right to know. I understand, Maria said, though her stomach dropped at the thought of Michael's reaction. The activities are taking place in the multipurpose room. The children don't know you're coming. We'll let you introduce yourself naturally. But Mrs. Gonzalez, the principal's tone carried a warning. Whatever family issues exist between you and your son, these children's emotional well-being comes first. Always. Always, Maria agreed. She followed signs to the multipurpose room, her legs feeling unsteady. Through the open doors, she could see small clusters of children and grandparents working on crafts, sharing stories, laughing together. The room hummed with the warm energy of intergenerational connection, and then she saw them. Sophia sat at a table near the window, her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail that reminded Maria achingly of Michael at that age. She was helping a classmate with a friendship bracelet, her small fingers patient and careful. 6 feet away, Diego was building something elaborate with blocks, his tongue poking out in concentration just like his father used to do during homework. They were beautiful. They were perfect. They were hers. Maria took a deep breath and stepped into the room, ready to meet her grandchildren for the first time, and prepared for whatever consequences would follow. Maria stood at the edge of the multipurpose room for a full minute, drinking in the sight of her grandchildren. Sophia had Michael's serious expression when she concentrated. The same little furrow between her eyebrows that had appeared when he was working through math problems at the kitchen table. Diego's laugh bright and uninhibited as he knocked over his block tower and immediately started rebuilding reminded her of every birthday party, every Christmas morning, every moment of joy she'd shared with her son before life became complicated. Are you looking for someone? A gentle voice interrupted her observation. Mrs. Patterson, Sophia's teacher, approached with a warm smile. I'm guessing you're here for one of our students. I'm Maria Gonzalez, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. I'm here to meet Sophia and Diego Reyes. Mrs. Patterson's smile flickered slightly clearly. News of the unusual situation had traveled through the teacher network. Oh, well, they're both here today. Sophia was just telling me yesterday how much she wanted to have a grandmother present for today's activities. The teacher paused, studying Maria's face. She's been curious about grandmothers lately, always. Asking what they're like, what they do with their grandchildren. The ache in Maria's chest intensified. Her granddaughter had been yearning for her without even knowing she existed. Would it be all right if I approached them? Maria asked. Of course, let me help with introductions. Mrs. Patterson led her towards Sophia's table. Sophia, sweetie, there's someone here who'd like to meet you. Sophia looked up from her friendship bracelet, her dark eyes Michael's eyes meeting Maria's for the first time. The recognition wasn't immediate, but something flickered across the 8-year-old's face. Some genetic memory, perhaps, or simply the natural curiosity children have about new adults. Hi there, Maria said, crouching down to Sophia's eye level. Her hands were trembling slightly, but her voice held steady. My name is Maria. I'm actually your grandmother, your dad's mom. The words hung in the air between them. Sophia's eyes widened, her small hands still clutching the colorful threads of her bracelet, but ... Sophia's voice was barely a whisper. Daddy said our grandmother was gone. He said she was in heaven with the angels. The simple, innocent statement hit Maria like a physical blow. She had to grip the edge of the table to steady herself. Michael hadn't just told them she was dead, he'd created an entire mythology around her absence, complete with angels and heaven and the finality of loss. Well, Maria said carefully, fighting back tears, I'm very much here, and I've been hoping to meet you for a very long time. Sophia stared at her, processing this information with the intense focus children bring to life-changing moments. You look like Daddy, she said finally. Around the eyes? People always said that when he was your age. Maria smiled. He had the longest eyelashes, just like you do, Diego. Sophia suddenly called across the room. Diego, come here. Come meet our grandmother. Diego looked up from his blocks, saw Sophia's excited face, and abandoned his construction project without hesitation. He approached cautiously, the way children do when adults present them with information that doesn't match their understanding of the world. This is our daddy's mommy, Sophia explained to her little brother, her voice filled with wonder. She's our grandmother, and she's not dead. Diego studied Maria with the serious intensity of a 6-year-old trying to solve a puzzle. Are you sure? He asked. Because Daddy cried when he told us about you being dead. Grown-ups don't usually cry unless something really bad happened. The innocence of the observation broke something open in Maria's chest. Michael had grieved her while she was alive, had cried over her loss while actively maintaining it. The cruelty and sadness of it threatened to overwhelm her, but she forced herself to focus on the two small faces looking up at her with growing excitement and confusion. Sometimes, Maria said gently, grown-ups make mistakes about complicated things. Your daddy and I? We had some disagreements, some hurt feelings, and maybe he thought it would be easier if you didn't know about me yet. But why? Sophia asked with the direct honesty of childhood. Grandmothers are supposed to make cookies and tell stories and give hugs. Maria at my dance class says her grandmother braids her hair and teaches her songs in Spanish. I know songs. In Spanish, Maria said softly, and I make very good cookies. Chocolate chip with extra vanilla, just like your daddy used to love. Diego stepped closer, his wariness giving way to curiosity. Can you teach me Spanish words? Mommy says it's important to learn languages, but she only knows French. I can teach you all the Spanish words you want to learn, Maria promised. Starting with te amo, which means I love you. Te amo, Diego repeated carefully, his pronunciation surprisingly good. Te amo también, Maria responded, meaning I love you too. And Diego beamed with pride at understanding. Sophia was studying Maria intently, her 8-year-old mind working through the implications of this revelation. If you're our real grandmother and you're not dead, then where have you been? Why haven't we seen you before? It was the most difficult question, the one Maria had been dreading. How do you explain family dysfunction to children without damaging their relationship with their father? How do you tell the truth without creating more pain? Sometimes, Maria said slowly, when people love each other very much but can't agree on important things, they need space to figure things out. Your daddy and I needed some space, and maybe that space lasted longer than it should have. But you're here now, Diego said, it being more statement than question. I'm here now, Maria confirmed. Are you going to stay? Sophia asked, and the hope in her voice nearly undid Maria completely before she could answer. The multipurpose room door burst open with enough force to make several grandparents look up from their activities. Michael stood in the doorway, his face flushed red, his hair disheveled as if he'd been running his hands through it. His eyes swept the room until they landed on the scene at Sophia's table, his mother crouched between his children, all three of them looking up at him with expressions ranging from joy to apprehension to guilt. Mom, he said, his voice tight with controlled anger. We need to talk now. The entire room seemed to hold its breath. Other grandparents pretended to focus on their crafts while clearly listening to the family drama unfolding. Teachers moved closer, ready to intervene if necessary. Sophia and Diego looked between their father and their newfound grandmother, sensing the tension but not understanding its source. Daddy, Sophia said, her voice small but determined, why did you tell us our grandmother was dead when she's right here? The question hung in the air like a challenge, spoken with the devastating honesty that only children possess. Michael's face cycled through several emotions: anger, guilt, panic, love, before settling into the carefully controlled expression Maria recognized from every difficult conversation they'd had over the past 3 years. Sophia, Diego, he said, carefully, go with Mrs. Patterson for a few minutes while I talk to Maria. But Daddy, Diego protested, she was teaching me Spanish, and she makes chocolate chip cookies. Now, Michael said firmly, and something in his tone made both children reluctantly follow Mrs. Patterson to the other side of the room. Though they kept looking back over their shoulders, Maria stood slowly, her knees stiff from crouching, her heart hammering against her ribs. This was the confrontation she'd been both anticipating and dreading for 3 years. This was the moment when the silence would finally be broken, when the truth would demand its place in the light. Hello, Michael, she said quietly. What the hell do you think you're doing? He whispered, mindful of the listening ears around them. I'm meeting my grandchildren, Maria replied with a calm she didn't feel. I'm introducing myself to two beautiful children who have been wondering why they don't have a grandmother like their classmates. Michael's jaw tightened. You had no right. No right to come here, to confuse them, to exist, Maria interrupted, her voice still quiet but gaining strength. I had no right to exist in their lives, to be their grandmother, to love them. That's not what I meant, and you know it. Then what did you mean, mijo? Help me understand how a mother becomes so dangerous. To her own family that she has to be erased from existence? Around them, the grandparents' day activities had essentially stopped as other families became unwilling witnesses to their confrontation. Maria was aware of the attention but found she didn't care. She'd been silent for too long, invisible for too long, apologetic for too long. We'll discuss this at home, Michael said through gritted teeth. Get your things. You're leaving now. No, Maria said simply. The word seemed to surprise them both. Michael had grown accustomed to her compliance, her willingness to accommodate. His rules and restrictions, the simple refusal hit him like a slap. No, he repeated. No, I'm not leaving. I'm not disappearing again. I'm not going to pretend I don't exist while my grandchildren wonder why they're different from every other child in this room. Maria's voice was growing stronger, more confident. I've played by your rules for 3 years, Michael. I've respected your wishes, stayed in the shadows, accepted visits at your convenience, but not anymore. Mom, you don't understand the position you're putting me in, the position I'm putting you in. Maria's control finally cracked, her voice, rising enough to make several people look over directly. The position you put me in was having to grieve my own son while he was alive. The position you put me in was watching from coffee shop windows while my grandchildren grew up without knowing I love them. The position you put me in was being dead to my own family. The raw pain in her voice seemed to shock Michael into silence. For a moment, his carefully constructed adult facade cracked, and she could see the little boy she'd raised, the one who used to crawl into her bed during thunderstorms, the one who'd held her hand at his high school graduation and whispered, "Thank you, Mom, for everything." They think I'm dead, Michael, Maria continued, her voice breaking. Your children think their grandmother is dead, and you cried when you told them. You grieved me to my own grandchildren. Tears were streaming down her face now, 3 years of suppressed anguish finally finding release. I have missed birthday parties and first days of school and loose teeth and Christmas mornings. I have missed watching them grow up. I have missed being their grandmother. The multi-purpose room had gone completely quiet now. Even the children seemed to sense the gravity of the moment, their voices dropping to whispers as they watched the adult drama unfold. Michael looked around the room, seeming to realize for the first time that their family business was being aired in front of teachers, parents, and children. His face flushed deeper red. This isn't the place, he said quietly. Then when is the place? Maria asked. When do I get to be their grandmother? When do I get to exist in their lives? When do they get to know that they are loved by someone who has been waiting 3 years to hold them? Before Michael could answer, a small voice piped up from across the room. Daddy. Sophia had broken away from Mrs. Patterson and was walking toward them, her face serious and determined. Are you making our grandmother go away again? The question hung in the air between them, spoken with the kind of clarity that cuts through adult complications and gets straight to the heart of things. Michael looked down at his daughter, his mouth opening and closing without sound. Because, Sophia continued, her 8-year-old voice carrying across the silent room, I really want a grandmother, and she seems really nice. And she looks like you, so she must be family. And family is supposed to stick together, right? The silence in the multi-purpose room stretched until it became almost unbearable. Sophia stood between her father and grandmother, her small frame somehow commanding the attention of every adult in the space. Diego had joined her, taking her hand with the instinctive solidarity of siblings who sensed their world shifting. Michael looked at his children, then at his mother, then around the room full of witnesses to his family's unraveling. Maria could see the exact moment when his carefully constructed walls began to crumble, when the weight of 3 years of lies became too heavy to carry. Sophia, Diego, he said, his voice hoarse. Come here. The children approached cautiously, and Michael knelt down to their level, bringing himself eye to eye with the 2 small people whose lives he was about to explain, and possibly complicate forever. You're right that Maria is your grandmother, he began, his voice barely above a whisper. She's my mom, which makes her your abuela. Then why did you tell us she was dead? Diego asked with the brutal honesty of childhood. Michael's hands shook slightly as he reached for his children, pulling them closer. Because sometimes grown-ups make very bad decisions when they're scared or hurt or confused. And I made a very bad decision. Were you scared of Grandma Maria? Sophia asked, glancing over at Maria, who stood frozen, afraid to move or speak and somehow break this fragile moment of truth. Not scared of her, Michael said, his eyes meeting Maria's for the first time since he'd arrived. Scared of other things. Scared of disappointing people. Scared of making things complicated. Scared of having to explain mistakes I made a long time ago? What kind of mistakes? Diego pressed. Because 6-year-olds don't understand that. Some questions are too complicated for multi-purpose rooms and grandparents' day celebrations. Michael closed his eyes briefly, and when he opened them, Maria saw something she hadn't seen in years. Her son, vulnerable and honest, instead of the guarded man he'd become. When I was growing up, Michael said slowly, we didn't have very much money. Your grandmother worked very hard to take care of us. But sometimes people at school or other places made me feel ashamed. Ashamed of our apartment. Ashamed of her accent. Ashamed that she cleaned hospital rooms while other kids' parents were doctors and lawyers. Maria felt like she'd been struck. All these years, she'd never known that her sacrifices had become sources of shame for him. When I got older and went to college and started making more money, I thought I could leave all that behind. I thought I could build a new life where nobody knew about the struggles we'd had, and when I married your mom, Rebecca, Michael paused, glancing around the room full of listening ears. Daddy, Sophia said gently, are you ashamed of Grandma Maria? The question hung in the air like a weight. Michael looked at his daughter, then at his mother, and Maria saw the moment when the truth became too powerful to contain. He whispered. I was ashamed, and I was wrong, and I hurt the person who loved me most in this world. The admission seemed to break something open in the room. Maria felt her knees weaken, and she reached for a nearby chair to steady herself. After 3 years of wondering, 3 years of not understanding how love could turn to rejection so completely, she finally had her answer. But Grandma Maria is nice, Diego said, confused. She taught me Spanish words, and she has soft hands like Mommy. Why would you be ashamed of nice? Because sometimes people make mistakes about what's important, Michael said, his voice thick with emotion. Sometimes people think having fancy things or talking a certain way or living in a certain neighborhood is more important than having people who love you. And I made that mistake. Sophia looked between her father and grandmother, her 8-year-old mind working through concepts that many adults struggle with for decades. So you told us she was dead because you were embarrassed? She asked, with the devastating simplicity children bring to complex situations. Yes, Michael said quietly, and that was the biggest mistake I've ever made. The room remained silent except for the humming of fluorescent lights and the distant sounds of other classes. In the hallway, Maria realized that everyone in the room, teachers, grandparents, children, had become witnesses to a family's healing, to the moment when years of buried pain finally found the light. Grandma Maria, Sophia said suddenly, turning to face her, are you going to forgive Daddy for lying about you being dead? The question was so direct, so innocent, and so impossible to answer simply that Maria found herself laughing through her tears. Oh, sweetheart, she said, moving toward her grandchildren. Families are complicated, but love is simple. She knelt down beside Michael, close enough that she could smell his familiar cologne. Close enough to see the tears he was trying so hard not to shed in front of his children. I have been angry, she said, speaking to Sophia and Diego but looking at Michael. I have been hurt and sad and lonely, but I have never, not for one single day, stopped loving your daddy, and I could never, ever stop loving you. Even though he was mean to you? Diego asked. Even then, Maria confirmed, because that's what love means. It means staying even when things are hard. It means forgiving even when it hurts. It means believing that people can change and do better. Michael was openly crying now. The carefully controlled facade of successful businessman and perfect father completely dissolved. Mom, he whispered, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Maria reached out and touched his face, the way she used to when he was small and needed comfort after nightmares or scraped knees. I know, mijo, she said softly. I know. Can we hug now? Sophia asked, because this feels like a hugging moment. And, somehow, in a multi-purpose room full of strangers, surrounded by forgotten craft projects, and witness to their family's most painful truths, they came together. Michael wrapped his arms around his children and his mother, and Maria held all 3 of them as tightly as she could, feeling complete for the first time in 3 years. The hug lasted long enough for Maria to memorize the feeling. Sophia's small body pressed against her side, Diego's arms around her neck, Michael's shoulders shaking with the release of years of suppressed guilt and shame. When they finally separated, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. So Sophia said, with the practical nature of children who've processed emotional complexity and are ready to move forward, are you going to come to our house now and meet Mommy? And make those chocolate chip cookies you mentioned? The question brought them all back to reality. Rebecca, the phone calls that had surely been made by now. The confrontation that was still waiting at home. The work of rebuilding a family that had been fractured for 3 years. I don't know, Maria said, honestly. That's going to depend on a lot of things that your daddy and I need to figure out. But you're not going to disappear again, right? Diego asked with the worry of a child who'd just learned that adults sometimes lie about important things. No, Maria said firmly, looking directly at Michael. I'm not disappearing again, ever. Michael nodded, understanding the promise and the boundary she was setting. We have a lot to work through, he said. It's going to be complicated. Good thing we have help, Sophia said, gesturing around the room where other families were pretending not to watch their reunion while clearly invested in the outcome. Mrs. Patterson approached carefully, her teacher's instincts guiding her toward resolution and practical next steps. I hate to interrupt, she said gently, but we do need to finish our Grandparents' Day activities. Sophia, Diego, would you like to show your grandmother the projects you've been working on? Yes, both children said simultaneously, the emotional intensity of the last 20 minutes giving way to excitement about sharing their creations, as Sophia pulled Maria toward the craft table where she'd abandoned her friendship bracelet, and Diego tugged on Michael's hand to show him the rebuilt block tower. Maria caught Mrs. Patterson's eye. Thank you, she mouthed silently. Thank you for staying, Mrs. Patterson whispered back. They needed this. All of you needed this. The next hour passed in a blur of construction paper, turkeys, stories about family traditions, and the gradual, careful process of grandchildren getting to know their grandmother. Maria learned that Sophia wanted to be a veterinarian, that Diego was afraid of dogs but loved cats, that both children were curious about Mexico and their heritage in ways that Rebecca had never encouraged. As the official activities wound down, and other families began to leave, Michael approached Maria hesitantly. Mom, he said quietly, Rebecca is. She's waiting at home. She's not happy about how this happened. I imagine she's not, Maria replied. But Michael, this happened because it needed to happen. These children have a right to know their family. All of their family. I know that now. But the transition, it's going to be difficult. Rebecca has built her whole identity around being the only maternal figure in the kids' lives. She's going to see this as a threat. Maria nodded, understanding the complexity of the situation they were walking into. Then we'll take it slow. We'll be respectful. But Michael, I won't be erased again. Not from their lives, not from family, photos, not from Christmas mornings or birthday parties. Those days are over. I understand, Michael said, and for the first time in years, Maria believed he truly did. Sophia bounced over with a construction paper turkey she'd decorated with glitter and feathers. Grandma, Maria, I made this for you. It's supposed to represent gratitude, and I'm grateful that you're not actually dead. The innocent statement made both adults laugh, despite the emotional heaviness of the day. I'm grateful for that too, sweetheart, Maria said, accepting the turkey like it was made of gold. And I'm grateful that I finally got to meet you and your brother. Will you come to dinner on Sunday? Diego asked, appearing beside them with his block creation carefully balanced in his small hands. We always have big dinners on Sunday, and Mommy makes pot roast. Michael and Maria exchanged glances over the children's heads. Sunday dinner. With Rebecca, the ultimate test of whether this fragile new beginning could survive contact with reality. Well, see, Michael said carefully, there are some conversations that need to happen first. Grown-up conversations, Sophia said with the world-weary tone of an 8-year-old who'd witnessed more adult drama in one afternoon than most children see in months. Exactly, Maria agreed. But Sophia, Diego, I want you to know something very important. No matter what happens with the grown-up conversations, no matter how long it takes us to figure things out, you will always be able to find me. I live at 428 Desert Bloom Drive, apartment 1-B. I drink coffee at Sunrise Cafe on Central Avenue every Tuesday morning. I volunteer at St. Mary's Food Bank every Saturday. I am not hard to find, and I will never hide from you again. She was giving them her information in front of Michael, making it clear that the days of secret visits and controlled access were over. The children were too young to fully understand the significance. But Michael's expression told her he got the message loud and clear. Can we call you Sophia? Asked, like on the phone. Anytime you want, Maria said, pulling out her cell phone. Here, let me put my number in your daddy's phone so you'll have it. As she handed the phone back to Michael, their fingers brushed, and she felt the tremor in his hands. He was scared, she realized. Scared of the conversation waiting at home, scared of Rebecca's reaction, scared of navigating the complicated process of reintegrating a family member he'd worked so hard to erase. It's going to be okay, she said quietly, just for him. We're going to figure this out. How can you be so sure? He asked. Maria looked at Sophia and Diego, who were comparing their art projects, and chattering about what games they wanted to teach their newfound grandmother. And she felt something she hadn't experienced in 3 years. Hope, because look at them, she said simply. Look how easily they accepted me, how naturally they included me. Children don't hold grudges the way adults do. They don't complicate love the way we do. They just ... love. Michael followed her gaze to his children, and she saw his expression soften. They're going to be okay, Maria continued. Sophia and Diego are going to be okay because now they know they have a grandmother who loves them. That knowledge doesn't go away, even if the visits are difficult or infrequent. It becomes part of who they are, and us. Maria considered the question seriously. The shame Michael had carried, the rejection she'd endured, the lies that had been told all of that would take time to heal. But looking at her son's face, seeing the genuine remorse and the beginning of hope, she felt something shift inside her chest. We're going to work at it, she said finally. You're my only child. I didn't raise you for 20 years just to give up on you now. Forgiveness isn't about deserving, Maria said. It's about choosing love over hurt, hope over resentment. It's about believing that people can change and relationships can heal. Grandma Maria, Diego interrupted, tugging on her purple dress. Are you going to cry again? Because you've been crying a lot today? These are happy tears, sweetheart, Maria said, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. Grown-ups cry because they're so happy they don't know what else to do. Like when Daddy cried at my dance recital? Sophia asked. Exactly like that, Maria confirmed, as they gathered their things and prepared to leave the school. For all of you, thank you for letting it happen, Maria replied. Sometimes important truths need to be spoken in front of other people who can hold everyone accountable for doing better. As they walked toward the parking lot, Sophia slipped her small hand into Maria's and Diego took her other hand. Michael walked beside them, carrying their art projects and looking like a man who was trying to figure out how to rebuild his life. From the ground up, Grandma Maria, Sophia said as they reached the cars. What's going to happen now? What happens when the truth has been told but the real work of healing hasn't even begun? Your daddy and I are going to have some long conversations. He's going to talk to your mommy about how our family is changing, all the adults in his life to get along. I don't know, Maria answered honestly, but I hope we can find a way to respect each other for your sake and Sophia's sake. Michael had been quiet during this exchange, but now he cleared his throat. Mom, would you follow us home? Not to come in, necessarily, but to be nearby while I talk to Rebecca. In case didn't finish the sentence, but Maria understood. In case Rebecca refused to accept the new reality, in case the conversation went badly and the children needed reassurance that their grandmother wasn't disappearing again. Of course, Maria said. I'll be there. Back? Me too? 20 minutes later, Maria sat in her Honda Civic outside Michael's house, the first time she'd ever seen where her grandchildren lived. It was a beautiful home in a well-established neighborhood, with a 2-car garage and a front yard that looked like it belonged in a magazine. Rebecca's white SUV sat in the driveway. Truth? Through the window, she could see the family gathering in what looked like the living room. Michael was gesturing, clearly explaining the day's events. But don't understand its source. Maria's phone rang. Michael's name appeared on the screen. Mom, his voice was strained. Can you come in? Rebecca wants to meet you. The moment she'd been dreading and hoping for in equal measure had arrived. Maria checked her reflection in the rearview mirror, smoothed her purple dress. The door opened before she could knock. Rebecca stood there, her blonde hair perfectly styled despite the emotional upheaval of the afternoon, her expression carefully controlled but unmistakably cold. Hello, Maria, she said. I think we need to talk. Behind Rebecca, Maria could see Sophia and Diego peering around the corner, their faces bright with excitement at seeing their grandmother again so soon. Michael stood in the background, his expression tense with apprehension. Hello, Rebecca, Maria replied, stepping across the threshold into her grandchildren's home for the first time. I think we do. The door closed behind her with a soft click, sealing them all inside together for adults and 2 children who were about to discover whether love could triumph, whether truth could heal wounds that had been festering in silence, whether a family that had been broken could find a way to make itself whole again. Outside, the Arizona sun was setting, painting the suburban neighborhood in shades of gold and pink. Inside, in a living room decorated with family photos that had never included Maria, the real work of becoming a family was about to begin. The conversation that followed would be difficult. There would be tears, raised voices, accusations, and moments when it seemed like the fragile progress made at Lincoln Elementary might crumble under the weight of adult complications and competing loyalties, but in the end, love would prove stronger than shame, truth more powerful than lies. Would get their Sunday dinners with pot roast and stories in Spanish. Michael would begin the long process of forgiving himself and rebuilding his relationship with his mother, diminish her own importance in their lives, and Maria would finally. After 3 years of invisibility, Rebecca's immaculate living room, surrounded by the family she'd been excluded from for so long, but it would be honest. And for a woman who had spent too many years living in the shadows of her own family's story, honesty felt like the most precious gift of all. "So," Rebecca said, settling into the chair across from her, "tell me about yourself. Tell me who you really are." And for the second time that day, Maria began to introduce herself not as a woman who had been erased or forgotten, but as a grandmother who had found her way back home.